All right, if you're thinking about moving to the Oregon coast in the coming year, you're going to want to check out this video. We're going to talk about everything you need to know. Stay tuned to learn more. Hey, what's up everybody? This is Clem with the Home Team Brokers coming to you from the Oregon coast. In this video, we're going to talk about all the things that you need to know when considering your move to the Oregon coast. So many people that we work with are moving from out of state, from a warmer climate in particular, to the Oregon coast, which by and large on paper looks really nice. It's a beautiful scenic area. Obviously, there's a ton of access to nature. There's a lot of small towns with a true quaint small seaside town feel that I think a lot of people are really looking for, but it can be a little bit of a shock to some people. For the most part, living on the Oregon coast is night and day different from where a lot of people are coming from around the country that we work with. Now, if you are thinking about moving to the Oregon coast and you want to talk more about the topics we're covering in this video, give us a call, send us a text, shoot us an email, click the link down below in the description of the video, schedule a Zoom call with us, and we can talk more about it. All right, so we do a lot of these videos, right, talking about what living on the Oregon coast is like, what it's gonna be like transitioning from where you live to the Oregon coast. And again, there's bound to be a lot of differences. A lot of those differences are surely what a lot of people are seeking out. But our goal, in making these videos is really to impart on people what they're getting themselves into. So of course that's going to be different for everybody depending on what you're looking for, the town you're living in, your lifestyle, where you're coming from, all of that good stuff. And that's really what we dig into with people more when we ultimately connect over the phone or schedule a Zoom call and talk more about a game plan for moving to the Oregon coast. But let's talk about some of the things that have changed, whether it is just my opinion or outlook or perspective on things or in the housing market. These things are always evolving, right, in terms of what the market is doing and ultimately what it's going to be like relocating from one area to another. All right, let's talk about the real estate market on the Oregon coast. What's changed there? So the Oregon coast is definitely a unique market, but has followed national trends. So the market was absolutely ripping for a couple of years, 2020 to 2022. Interest rates went up, which really caused things to hit a ceiling. Affordability was affected, so higher interest rates mean higher payment. The cost of borrowing money is more expensive, and that caused a lot of people to back away. There's also few people selling by and large because so many people have interest rates that are in the 2s and 3s and 4s, and they don't want to turn around and give that up, and buy a home with a 7 or 8% interest rate. So, again, that's something that has affected the market nationally. Transaction volume in Oregon is down about 35% as a whole. So there's been 35% less homes that have been bought and sold in Oregon in the past 12 to 18 months. So that is a significant decline. There's just less happening. So that does not mean that it's not a good time to buy necessarily, but of course, if you are financing a large portion of that purchase, that is really going to affect what your monthly payment is going to be. So, coming into 2024, that is definitely something that is kind of, underlying everything as far as what the market's doing now and what it's going to do moving forward. So interest rates are really a big driver as far as what the market's going to do. Inventory really affects what home values are going to do, and for buyers, what they have to choose from. And then also on the Oregon coast, the market is very seasonal. We have this period of time really between Memorial Day and Labor Day, really probably through October, where there's more sunny days, it's drier, it's more pleasant to visit the Oregon coast. And for a lot of people relocating to the Oregon coast, either for full-time or wanting to buy a vacation home or second home or rental, as an income property, it makes more sense for a seller to list their property during that time. It makes more sense to do your shopping during that time as well, but that doesn't mean that the winter isn't a good time to buy. In fact, you can typically get some pretty good deals this time of year coming into the colder months because of the inactivity. So that's something that we can definitely discuss further if you want to connect with us. But seasonality, again, definitely plays a big role. So, all of those things hold true regardless of what rates are doing, inventory is doing, or what time of year it it is, but right now, moving into 2024, rates are still pretty high, inventory is relatively low, but that is starting to shift because so few buyers are out there active right now that sellers are having a harder time getting things sold. So it's not necessarily that we're seeing an influx of new inventory hit the market, but things that get listed, properties that have been listed over the last 3, 4, 5, 6+ months are sitting on the market longer. So that is creating a larger pool of inventory, which is having a little bit of a downward pressure effect on prices. So if you are coming in to, maybe into next year looking to purchase a home on the Oregon coast, it's really a good time to get a good deal on a property in terms of your purchase price. Most of what we've done this year has been below list price. And so if market conditions hold more or less steady, that should be the expectation coming into next year. Again, the sacrifice is going to be if you're financing, and especially if you're financing a large portion of that purchase, your payment's going to be higher than what it was a couple years ago and potentially what it might be in a couple of years. But there's always going to be an opportunity to refinance. In a couple of years, you might be looking at paying $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 more for the same property, if you were to wait as opposed to purchasing it today. Sellers are offering more concessions. Sellers are more willing to help you buy down your interest rate, help perform repairs, or just provide concessions, maybe a credit towards your closing cost, because it's just not that competitive right now. So if you're buying cash, especially, this is about as good a time to purchase as I can remember in recent years, again, because it is so much less competitive than it has been. Okay, we can dig into the market stuff, market conditions. Should you buy now? Should you wait? If you want to get in touch with us, that's something we can definitely discuss further. Now, if this is your first time to the channel or you've been here and you haven't already and you want to get more videos like this, make sure to hit the subscribe button, tap the little bell to get notified every time we drop a new video. All right, so let's talk about the weather, something we talk about a lot in a lot of these videos. And obviously, if you're relocating from out of state, from an area that is warmer, in particular, it's definitely going to be a little bit of a shock, even if you know what you're getting into more or less. And so that's something that we really try to talk about and prepare people for. I think a lot of people are moving to the Oregon coast for the more mild climate, for some of the rain and overcast and moody weather that you can get on the Oregon coast. Because if you're in a climate that is sunny 24/7, yes, that is nice, but maybe gets a little bit old. I think a lot of people have had their fill of that, and a lot of areas are just getting too hot. So the Oregon coast provides a really, really nice alternative for somebody looking for that type of weather in particular. But again, it's going to be a little bit of a shock. So, that's something that we can, again, dig into a little bit more. I don't want to really harp on the weather so much as talk about, if you're purchasing a home on the Oregon coast, what the weather is going to do to homes in this region. So if you're right on the ocean, if you're getting hit with wind and salty air all the time, that's really a recipe for disaster in terms of what that can do to your home. But there are a lot of things that you can do to mitigate that in terms of ongoing routine maintenance that honestly is going to be an investment of your time and resources for sure. So this is something that you really should think about and know going into this, is that, homes on the Oregon coast, especially if they are right on the beach, most things west of Highway 101 basically is a good way to think about it. There's going to be a lot of protocols that you should put in place to protect the integrity of the home and the structure. The exterior hardware, the siding, the paint can wear off, your HVAC system can get rusty. So it's not just the exterior of the home necessarily, the interior can be affected as well. Roofs don't last as long. Crawl spaces can get murky and damp, and that can cause issues. So there's a whole host of items that, again, really going into purchasing a home at the Oregon coast, you should be aware of in terms of what you're getting into. You get a little bit further east of the highway, the further away basically from the coastline and from the ocean that you get, the less of this there is. But even a little bit off the coast, or even over across the coastal range in the Willamette Valley, Oregon is a wetter state. Moisture is probably your home's number one enemy. So this is an area that, even if you're not getting battered by wind all the time, from the ocean, coming off the ocean, there's still a lot of things that you need to know going into this. And I think one thing that does come as a surprise for people, and one thing that you really should be aware of when you're stepping into the process of purchasing a home at the Oregon coast, that it's not just what you need to do when you inherit a property and ongoing, to again protect the integrity of the home and mitigate some of these issues that can happen. But it's also what condition you'll expect to find the property in. So more often than not, and I think really the expectation should be that when you purchase a home at the Oregon coast, there's going to be some level of deferred maintenance. There's going to be issues, probably moisture related, that need to be taken care of. Now, again, right now, that's something that it's more likely we can negotiate with the seller on, to either have the seller perform a repair, reduce the price, cover some of the closing costs, whatever it may be. Now, if the market gets more competitive, buyers aren't going to have as much leverage in requesting those types of seller concessions. But either way, we tour a lot of properties with people. Again, I would expect at least more than 50% of the properties that we look at to have some type of moisture-related issues, and more often than not, things that you would need to step in and correct right away, even if it's just coming in and performing some routine maintenance that aren't necessarily all that costly. All right, next, and something we talk about a lot, is this is small town living. So we have worked with a lot of people who have moved from small rural communities across the country and in Oregon. But most people are coming from a more populated area, whether it's a major metro area or even just a town of 25, 50, 75,000 people, which again is going to be much larger than anything you get on the Oregon coast, with the exception of Coos Bay and North Bend. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but that is going to be a bit of a transition, from what you're coming from. And we really try to talk about and prepare people for what it's going to be like living in smaller towns and more rural communities, in particular, that are more isolated from larger, more populated areas as well. All up and down the Oregon coast, you have the coastal range, really separating Western Oregon and the I-5 corridor from 101 and the coastal towns in Oregon. So whether or not that's something that you are looking for specifically, whether or not that's something where it's just a trade-off, you want to live at the ocean, and it's going to mean living in a bit of a smaller town, which maybe isn't your preference. Either way, again, this is going to be something where a lot of the considerations aren't just having less people around you or it being less busy necessarily, which I think in and of itself for a lot of people is what they're looking for. They want the peace and quiet. They want to get away from the hustle and bustle. That's why a lot of people move to the Oregon coast. But I think in particular, as it pertains to amenities and services, these are things where it's not like you can't live your life normally like you would anywhere else in most places on the Oregon coast, but there are more sacrifices and there are more accommodations that you need to make living on the Oregon coast. Access to grocery stores, or at least multiple options for grocery stores. Most of these towns have restaurants and things to do. We'll talk more about that, but there's definitely a smaller volume of restaurants and things to do, for sure, at least in town things. There's no shortage of outdoor activities and getting out on the beach and things like that. But in these towns, in these areas, it doesn't take long to kind of cover all the ground very quickly. For example, it wouldn't take very long living in any of the towns on the Oregon coast to have maybe tried out all of the restaurants, for example. That's something that you can do, in a matter of months. So healthcare is a big one, of course, access to healthcare, different facilities for, maybe athletic endeavors, ice skating rinks and swimming pools. These are things that people ask about. Longer drives to get to what you need. Although the trade-off there, that's something that, we talk to people a lot about, but a lot of people say, well, I lived in this town and to get to my work was 10 miles away and it took 45 minutes in traffic. A lot of what you get on the Oregon coast, might be 15, 20 miles away, but you can get there in 20, 25 minutes, depending on how fast you drive and everything. But, so there's longer distances, greater distances, but of course you don't have all the stoplights and the traffic and all that stuff, that you might have to deal with in a more populated area. Now, like I mentioned, there's definitely plenty to do on the Oregon coast. There's for sure a lot of restaurants. There's a lot of great restaurants, and if you like seafood, there's no shortage of that, obviously. A lot of the towns on the Oregon coast with the highest volume of restaurants and things to do are more catered to tourism. Tourism is the number one industry on the Oregon coast. And so that's not an issue necessarily in and of itself, but something that, again, is just going to be a little bit of a transition and maybe something to get used to. So if you look at some of the towns that have, the great downtown areas with, walkability and things to get out and do and see, Seaside, Cannon Beach, Newport, among others, Astoria. So much of what you get, again, is catered to tourists. So the shops and the boutiques and the candy stores and the t-shirt shops and the art galleries and the restaurants too, of course, again, which a lot of these towns on the Oregon coast have really, really great restaurants. But you're going to find that a lot of these places are really brimming with tourists. And so maybe that's not an issue, again, necessarily, but just something to know. Looking into next year, if you're really thinking about moving to the Oregon coast, these are areas that have a lot of people moving in and out and that are, or just coming and going, where it's very transient compared to probably where you're coming from. Now, everywhere on the Oregon coast, every town on the Oregon coast has some element of tourism, where people visit for a weekend, come stay a week, whatever it may be. I think for sure areas that are closer to Portland get a higher volume of that, or at least areas in closest proximity to the Willamette Valley from Portland down to Eugene. So really Florence up to Astoria. This is going to be the region that's most accessible to most of the population in Oregon, where most people can drive 1.5 to maybe 2.5 hours to get to any of these towns in this region or stretch of the Oregon coast. So these are going to be areas where tourism is going to be a little bit more of a factor, or it's at least going to be something that you're seeing on more of a consistent basis. In my opinion, I think the most populated non-tourism focused areas are probably Coos Bay and North Bend and Brookings. Again, these areas get their fair share of tourism, no doubt. They're beautiful, scenic areas, definitely areas that people love to visit, but these are towns, again, that are just less accessible, from where most of the people can drive in to different towns on the Oregon coast. So Coos Bay, North Bend, about 25,000 plus people who live in the area. This is more of a community that feels like has a much larger percentage of just local residents going about their business. Brookings as well, maybe a little bit more on the tourism end of things, but really just kind of a small town that just happens to be on the coast in a very, very beautiful area, and definitely attracts a lot of people who are looking for some of the warmer weather, because you get that Chetco effect. They get warmer air, warmer weather consistently throughout the year, and more sunny days than anywhere else on the Oregon coast as well. But again, it's not this bustling hub of tourism necessarily like some of the towns that you get on the central and northern Oregon coast. So the bigger towns on the Oregon coast, where you get a large percentage of full-time residents, where you just have a town that's operating with people who live there full-time and are engaged in the community, but also have a lot of tourism going on, it's going to be Astoria, Seaside, Tillamook to some degree, Lincoln City, Newport, and Florence, kind of going north to south there. So these are towns that all have about 10,000 people, and that all really have just a ton of industry catered to tourism in these areas. Now, in between all of that, there are dozens of little villages, either incorporated cities or just little unincorporated villages up and down the Oregon coast, in between the larger towns, that serve as really nice bedroom communities if you want to live near a larger town, not necessarily in one, where you can find, I think, some really good arrangements. And it gets a little more sparse from north to south. So between Astoria and Seaside and Tillamook, down to Lincoln City, down to Newport, really all the way down to Florence, you get a pretty good volume of these smaller little communities where, every 15, 20 minutes you're driving through one. Once you get south of Florence, it does get a little more sparse and a little more spread out. So regardless of what dynamic you're looking for, how isolated and how rural you want to be is really going to dictate how far north or how far south you are living on the Oregon coast. All right, when's the big one coming? When's the big tsunami going to hit? That's something that we get asked about a lot. I think first and foremost, living on the Oregon coast, there are plenty of opportunities to live at some relative elevation where you can get outside of the tsunami zone. There are well mapped and well marked tsunami evacuation routes where you at least have a chance to get to a place that is at some elevation to protect yourself. But there's plenty of residential development that is just basically right at sea level, where like you're on a kind of a level plane with the beach, and if a big one come, a lot of those properties are going to get wrecked pretty good probably. Now, there's a large 7.5 magnitude earthquake about every 300 years, and we are past due for that. So the last one was in 1700. there's a 37% chance that this big earthquake happens in the next 50 years. So, again, maybe a little bit of a roll of the dice, or again, at least a consideration when you're looking at kind of where you want to be in terms of elevation. There are certainly opportunities to be on the Oregon coast, live on the Oregon coast, have a sweeping ocean view, have quick access to the beach, but not necessarily be, right at beach level. And I think that is one thing that a lot of people don't necessarily realize overall about the Oregon coast. We talk a lot about how consistent all of these towns are in terms of what you get with the tourism aspect, with the scenery, the beauty, the beach, the weather. That's going to be more or less consistent anywhere you go on the Oregon coast. So a lot of times, for a lot of people, the house itself ultimately dictates where exactly somebody lands, which does make some sense, again, because you can get so much consistency up and down the Oregon coast. And maybe somebody narrows it down to 4, 5, 6 different towns. When that right property comes up, they're able to jump on it because they know that that particular town or area was on their list in terms of areas that they knew that they could see themselves living. So that's a very common way for things to play out, and I think that's definitely a good mindset going into it. But a lot of people, again, are really surprised at the variety that you can get, although there is so much consistency in terms of smaller homes, larger homes, newer homes, older homes, homes that are a little bit removed from the ocean, homes that are right in town, just different types and style of living. Again, more rural or in an area that feels a little bit more suburban. You can really get a pretty big range, and inventory is relatively steady. So for a lot of people, it doesn't take all that long to find something that's a really, really good fit. Now, we've definitely had a handful of clients over the years that have been searching for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years that are looking for a very, very specific type of property in a very, very specific location, and there are some things that just don't come up very often, at least at a price that's palatable. But for most people, again, just looking at kind of a cluster of towns or a couple of regions that make sense, that feel like a good fit, and then within that, engaging in a home search with specific criteria, it really doesn't take very long typically, to find the right one. Now, candidly, we help people relocate to the Oregon coast, and that is something that we would absolutely love to help you with as well. When you are moving to the Oregon coast, of course, finding the right agent that's going to get the job done for you makes a huge difference. And so, of course, we're making these videos to plug our services. So, that shouldn't be hidden. That's no secret, obviously. But when you are considering moving to the Oregon coast, I think one thing that you would find is that many, many, many real estate agents and real estate professionals on the Oregon coast only service a couple of towns or only service a specific county. And so between Seth and I and the network that we have with agents up and down the Oregon coast, we work from Astoria all the way north, 363 miles south, all the way to Brookings. And that's something that, again, is going to be pretty rare. And like I was talking about, for a lot of people, the exact town or region doesn't make as much difference as the right house in the right setting does. And that can be found in a lot of different areas. So our approach is working with people to determine what they're looking for as it relates to their lifestyle and their budget, and the type of environment they want to be in, and the style of home that they want to be in, and do they want something that needs no repairs, or they want a fixer-upper, all that stuff down the line, all that criteria, and then we can cast a really wide net to go out and find that. So if you are thinking about moving to the Oregon coast, if you want to talk more about some of the topics we've discussed in this video, if you want to learn more about what the process is going to be like, how we operate, give us a call, send us a text, shoot us an email, click the link down below in the description of the video, schedule a Zoom call with us, and we can put together a game plan for you. Now, if this video was helpful, make sure to hit the like button. That helps us out a lot. If you want to get more videos like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel, tap the little bell to get notified every time we drop a new video. As always, we really appreciate you watching. Until next time, we'll talk to you later.